of quarantine. What is this? Actually, 42 or 3, I think, something like that in California. It's the weekend, and it's interesting that I was looking at the weather through a whole lot of the country. It's going to be really warm this weekend, which means that's a great time for everybody to get out, but it's a good time to remember social distancing. They are closing beaches here in California because last weekend it was really warm, I think in the 90s, as I recall, and the beaches were just packed. So a lot of them are actually shutting down because they're afraid people are going to come swarming out there again and create problems. So, look, it's nice out and it's great to get outside. I've been talking to the different specialists on this that we've had on the show and hearing what they've had to say and listening to Dr. Fauci, and everybody agrees that fresh air is a great thing. So it's good to get out, but you do have to remember to maintain social distancing. I think Governor Newsom has even said here in California that you can play like singles racket sports, like I guess badminton, tennis, pickleball, whatever. Um, so people can get out and maybe play those games and do exercising because it's singles and they're spread out across the net. Uh, so I was just hearing from John Perry, our erstwhile director, that that's been something they've loosened up on. So maybe if that's your thing, you can get out and do that and have some camaraderie and some competition, but you still keep your distance across the net and all of that. So that would be great. Um, I'm really wanting to remind everyone, as we're now coming up on the bubble of starting to loosen restrictions and getting out, that the government can only say so much. The law can only say so much, but it really comes down to us as individuals to have the self discipline to be responsible when we go out there. I mean, obviously, there can't be a police officer everywhere. We don't want police officers everywhere breaking up 3 or 4 people talking on the corner. We just need to be responsible in how we do that. And I hope as the weekend comes, and I do hope you get out and enjoy some good weather, that you do remember, wear a mask. If you're out by yourself, keep it around your neck. If somebody comes up, put it up over your face. Do the things that you need to, because you don't want to be someone that sparks a resurgence of this, because we've got this on the run. We really do, and we really have made some progress. And I was reading an article about New Zealand, and their declaration is they have eliminated COVID virus from New Zealand. Now, that doesn't mean 0 cases, but they're saying they've got, in like the last several weeks, they've had like 3 or 4, 5 or 6 cases pop up here and there. And they did that because they shut everything down and people really, really adhered to it. So these measures do work. And that's a country with just over 4 million people in it. So it's a great social laboratory to see what works. And those people really stepped up, did what they had to do, and they virtually eliminated it from their country. And now they have had to close some borders and have quarantine on people when they come in. Um, but those are sacrifices they were willing to make. And they basically shut down the virus in the country. And let's hope it stays that way as they start to loosen things back up. But my point is just that all the things that we've all been doing, all the sacrifices we have been making, have had a profound effect on the spread of this virus. Has it eliminated everywhere? No. And it sounds funny to be saying this has worked when we have over 60,000 people that have lost their lives. But everything is relative. I mean, how much could it have been if those things hadn't been done? So give yourself credit. What you've done has worked, and hopefully you'll continue to do that even as the weather warms up and there's more temptation to get outside and therefore engage with other people. So I'm just saying, let's go into the weekend with a great attitude, and let's care about ourselves and each other and be sure we keep a focus. I want to talk about today's show in a minute. We've got some questions. Candace Carpenter says, what are some coping paths for those stuck at home and with mental health issues? My boyfriend and I are stuck at home with PTSD. Well, that is such a great question. And what I want to say is that everyone that's stuck at home right now, particularly if you already have some type of mental illness, mental emotional challenge that you were fighting before this started, clearly this can be a difficult time. Um, Post-traumatic stress disorder, acute stress disorder, anxiety, these things can all be triggered and magnified a tremendous amount when we're left by ourselves and we're in a high stress situation and we have these looming threats of is the disease going to get us, or is the economic collapse going to destroy our lives? We have all these things that are easy to focus and obsess about and feel like, well, I'm just sitting here waiting for it to happen. But the number one thing I would say to you is recognize you are not helpless. The worst situation you can get in, the worst situation you can get in mentally and emotionally that creates stress and anxiety is to feel like you're helpless, that there's nothing you can do to protect yourself, protect your loved ones. And that's just not the case. We've demonstrated that with our social distancing, with our quarantine, with our hand washing, with taking extra steps with what we bring into our home, with learning what it is about this virus that is so contagious, how it lives on surfaces, et cetera. Knowledge is power. So the number one thing is don't feel like you're helpless, because you're sitting around thinking, there's nothing I can do. This is either going to get me or it's not. That's just not true. You have the ability to dictate the outcome of this for yourself. And when you recognize that, you grasp that, it empowers you, and you do not feel nearly as anxious, because you do feel empowered. You do feel that you have control over your destiny. And that's what causes anxiety to build, is when you don't feel that way. So it's also important that you recognize if you are suffering from an acute stress disorder or PTSD. I was talking yesterday with the gentleman that heads up one of the biggest unions for EMTs, paramedics, fire inspectors, et cetera, for the fire department of New York City, 4,000 members. And they were talking about PTSD, and some of these people they're putting out on the street are new graduates that are 20, 21 years old. And one of the things we were talking about is how important it is to recognize when something has gone to the level of being more than just irritability. It's risen to the level of actually being pathology. So let me talk to you about how you know the difference. If you have PTSD, you're likely to have intrusive thoughts. These are involuntary memories, distressing dreams, vivid flashbacks about something that has really been the core traumatic event that created this problem for you. You're subject to having PTSD. You can spot it as a red flag if you are avoiding reminders, people, places, activities, objects, situations. People that have PTSD may resist talking about what happened or how they feel about it, because it's like, if I acknowledge this, if I even bring it up, it'll trigger all this inside me, and so they don't want to talk about it. Negative thoughts and feelings. People with PTSD start to blame themselves. They have internal dialogue like, I'm bad, no one can be trusted. There's just this ongoing fear, horror, anger, guilt, shame, all of those things. And if you're feeling that, then there's a good chance this isn't just irritability. This isn't just a cycle of mood. This is actually a pathology. This could very well be PTSD. And then there is the arousal and reactive symptoms. because it can be a loud noise, it can be a smell, it can be somebody touching you when you weren't expecting it from behind and you have a big reaction to it. That's telling you that you're stuck in this fight or flight loop that comes with PTSD sometimes. So you have to be aware that, hey, wait a minute, I'm showing a lot of the signs that Dr. Field has talked about here. So this may not just be a bad day. I may be suffering from a disorder. I may have PTSD. I may have an acute distress disorder. I may have an anxiety disorder. If those things are true, then you need to reach out for help. And the first thing to do is talk about it with those that you trust and that are around you. Don't withdraw. People tend to withdraw. And there are treatments for these things. Cognitive behavior therapy is a good treatment for this. Eye movement desensitization reprocessing is an evidence-based therapy that helps this. And these are things that can be done via teletherapy. And most therapists, most doctors are using telemedicine and teletherapy now. So check with your doctor, check with your caregiver, and see if that's available for you. But understand, this actually changes your brain. There's something in the brain called the amygdala, which is kind of the recorder for traumatic events. And the right side of the amygdala, in people that have PTSD, some studies have shown that it gets larger. Perhaps through overwork, it's been shown by some studies to be as much as 6% larger than those that don't have PTSD. So there is a neurological component to this. So you have to really be mindful of the fact that this isn't something you can just talk yourself out of. So Candace, I'm giving you a long answer to your question, but I'm telling you that if you know you have PTSD, then you do need to have help with that. Sometimes it may be medication. Sometimes it may be therapy that can be delivered in teletherapy over your computer at this point. The main thing is don't deny it, acknowledge that it's there, and do what you can to control it through relaxation, getting professional help, talking to people about it. Don't suffer with this alone. Lisa Ewing says, hi from Cleveland, Ohio. Any recommendations on dealing with an ex who's afraid to continue shared parenting because you are a critical care nurse? Boy, that is a tough one, isn't it? We've all seen the story that's been in the news of a woman that lost custody of her child because she was a frontline responder, and her husband, ex-husband, said, I don't want my child exposed to that because she's going there every day. She could be bringing this home and infecting the child. Well, that's a difficult thing, and maybe over the short run, you might want to make a new arrangement for child custody. I'm not saying redefine it, but you might want to work together to do whatever you feel comfortable with. But every nurse that I've talked to, every doctor that I've talked to, they don't just leave the hospital and come home. They change immediately out of their hospital clothes. They put on something fresh and clean. They come home. Before they go to their child, they go take a shower. They clean up. They get out of anything that could be contaminated. They take every measure they possibly can to be sure they don't carry the virus into the home. They monitor themselves very closely. They are constantly tested. They monitor their temperature. They do everything they can. But the only way you can have zero risk is if you have zero contact. So it's a calculated risk, and you have to decide how far you want to go in taking that risk. But if you're being responsible and prudent, as I know these caregivers are, that seems to me to be a reasonable risk that's being managed. And then you also have to weigh what is the impact on the child if all of a sudden you just disappear. That can have a profoundly negative effect on a child as well. So look, there's not any right or wrong answers here. Well, there are some wrong answers, but what I'm saying is there's not a perfect solution to this. So there's a calculated risk to everything you do. You just have to decide where you want the emphasis to be. Now, Tammy Hano Allen says, how do parents find a way to ease their child's children's fear of missing lessons at school, graduations. That's really sad for these kids. It is. It truly is. I've talked to so many, particularly high schoolers, that are saying, "I'm missing my graduation. I'm missing my prom. Uh, I'm not getting as well prepared for college." There's all kinds of concerns that these folks are going through, and I hate that. But that is the reality. What I've encouraged folks to do is to do as much of that as you possibly can. In other words, if you've got your prom dress, you've got your graduation plans, you may not be able to do that as it was planned at the school, but you can certainly do it at home. You've got the prom dress, you've got the tuxedo or whatever. Take those pictures. You'll have a better story to tell about this than anybody else that's gone through their lives. You'll say, "This was my pandemic prom. Look, here I am on the stairway. This is my beautiful dress." And you may not be able to actually have the celebration, the party, till maybe 2 or 3 months from now. And maybe you'll feel like going back and doing it then. Maybe you won't. But grab as much of this ritual as you possibly can now. Don't just say, "Well, that's gone, so I've got to give it up." Don't do that. Nobody's done anything wrong here. It's just the circumstances are what they are. So take the pictures. Acknowledge what uh, you've done in terms of graduating and all of the things that go along with that rite of passage. Don't just let that be wiped off from your life. Actually acknowledge it, memorialize it, take the pictures, have a Zoom session with your friends. Do anything you can to mark the circumstance. Does that mean you can go to the dance and go party and stuff? No, you can't do that, but do what you can do and recognize that this too shall pass, and maybe you can have this event in July or August. Who knows? We'll see what happens between now and then. Dahlia Aziz says, "Hi, Dr. Phil. I'm watching from Canada. Is a homemade face mask with paper towel as a filter effective?" Look, it's better than nothing, right? I mean, anything. This is a respiratory disease, which means in order for you to catch it, something from their respiratory system needs to get into your respiratory system. And something that protects you from somebody breathing and you inhaling it, droplets coming from their cough, their sneeze, or just their talking or whatever, and getting inhaled by you, the concentration strong enough to actually infect you. Anything that protects you from that is a help, right? If it's a paper towel, that's better than just being wide open. If it's a t-shirt cut up into pieces, that's better than nothing. Anything that you can have, as long as it's clean and you keep it disinfected, is going to help you. So I encourage you, absolutely. Homemade masks are definitely incremental over not having anything at all. They might be heavier than others that you would get that are actual, paper mask or whatever, but it is good to do that. It does help. Even a bandana tied around helps. Does that mean nothing can get inside? No. I'm not telling you it's perfect, but I'm saying it does help. Now, Gourmet Walia says, "Is sanitizer harmful for skin cells if used too much?" I'm not really qualified to answer that, so I'm gonna pass on that. I've said I'm not an infectious disease expert. I'm not a micromolecular biologist, which is what really you need to understand everything about this disease. I've talked to them a lot. I've interviewed them a lot, and I'm passing on to you what they tell me. But can you do this so much that it becomes toxic for your skin cells? I'm not qualified to answer that, but I will try and get you that answer and report it to you next week when I find out. I know your hands can get rough and dry and all if you wash them too much, so there's a balance in there. I notice it with myself, but I'll try to find you that answer, but I'm not qualified to give it to you. And one of the things that I said to you guys earlier in the week is that we are returning on Dr. Phil to shows that were shot before the pandemic. When you tune in to Dr. Phil, you're going to be seeing one or two things. You're either going to be seeing a show that was shot from home, but it's not about the pandemic. It's about relationships, parenting, life, all the things that we normally deal with. Or 80% plus of the time, you're going to see shows that are from the stage. Back on the Dr. Phil set at Paramount on stage 29 with audiences, with everything that we normally do for the show. And these are shows that we shot right before the pandemic that we were saving for the month of May because it's very important to advertisers, the month of May is. So some of our best shows of the year are right now coming up in May. And so I really encourage you to watch those because I just decided after talking to a lot of people that people need a break. We've just been so obsessed with this 24/7, 7 days a week, all pandemic, quarantine, COVID-19. We need a break. And so we're going to get back to pre-COVID-19 shows. They're new, they're originals. In fact, they're some of our best. And we're going to put those on to give you a break, give you a distraction from all of this. Today's show, I actually shot this one from home, but it has nothing to do with the pandemic. This is a guy that lives in Vegas named Mark Anthony, and he insists on being called both names, Mark Anthony, whatever. And he fell in love with a Russian bride-to-be. And they were in Vegas together for quite some time. And then they had a bit of a tiff, and she left early, still having time on her visa. She goes back to Moscow. So I'm talking to her from Moscow and him from Vegas on these Zoom sessions here. And their question for me is, should they get married or should they not? And I found him to be a very interesting individual. I think you'll find him to be very interesting. He has a lot of very strong beliefs, and she went home because he said he tested her. He wanted her to go do something, and when she didn't do it, they got upset, and there was a big blow up, and she went back to Moscow. Now she's in Moscow, he's in Vegas, and her son, should we get married? Should we meet in a neutral country and get married? And I asked them some very hard questions, and we'll get down. I'm interested to hear whether you think these two should get married or not. Now, she's not a mail order bride. That's not what I'm saying. She was somebody that was here. She's a professional DJ, very energetic personality, very attractive smile, and engaging personality. He's a very good-looking guy, really interesting set of beliefs on him. It's just two vibrant people asking where they should get married or not. I think you're going to find this very entertaining, very interesting, and we'll see if you can predict what my answer is going to be. It might surprise you, but that's on today's show. And then as we progress along this week, we've got some other things coming up next week. We've got a 46-year-old moocher dad that's sleeping in a bunk bed. We've got a catfish show. And this, you talk about stubborn. The title of this show is Help Me Prove My Mom to My Mom She's Been Scammed Out of $250,000. This just breaks my heart for these people because I know they're usually advanced in age, and this is their life savings. They've worked 30 years to put away this nest egg, and then some scammer comes and talks them out of it in a matter of weeks. It just breaks my heart to see. And then we've got Norma's online boyfriends. This is someone that has 2 online boyfriends, but they're not catfish. They're really real. But the question is, what are their motives? And it's a hell of a soap opera. And so we're getting back to some of the shows that I think you guys always love. They always get a lot of reaction. I think you need a break. Let's get back to some of the things that we focus on in life. It'll be a good break from all of this. So tune in, tell all your friends that we're getting back to other content, and I'll see what you have to say about those things. I'm going to be back Monday to talk about what's coming up for the week and let you know what's uh, cooking and what's happened over the weekend. I'm in constant touch with some of the top experts. I'll let you know what I'm finding out and tell you what's happening in the coming week. Let's stay in touch. I really enjoy talking to you guys. I get so much feedback after these things. I'm watching now on Instagram. There's this big stream of hearts going up the side and all these comments on the screen. And I'm, I love hearing from all of you commenting just while we're on screen, and the same thing on Facebook and YouTube. So I really enjoy doing these. I will talk to you on Monday. Be safe. Have a good weekend. Take care of yourselves. Take care of those you love. Let's be patient. We're getting close to turning this thing around. Let's not get right up to the finish line and stumble. Let's stay the course, follow the guidelines. Love you guys. We'll talk to you next week.